Hello, I'm Maddie from Evil's Cosplay and I'm finally back with another cosplay tutorial video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to make Megumin staff from the KonoSuba anime series. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we start, I have listed all the tools and materials I have used for this project in the description down below. I've also added my socials, so be sure to follow and subscribe if you find this video helpful. The first step is creating the template for the top and bottom of the staff. I have a Megumin figure, so it was handy to use its staff as a mini 3D reference. I also used reference images online until I created a shape I liked. You can do this on poster board or tiled printer paper. I used the plastic ornament that will become the red floating gem as a size guide as well. This is the shape I ended up with. I cut those templates out and traced them onto 1-inch green insulation foam. This is foam you can find at hardware stores like Home Depot or Lowe's. It's relatively easy to carve and is stiff and lightweight, but there are some precautions you need to take while working with this foam that I will cover soon. Make sure the ends are wide enough to fully cover the PVC pipe you'll use as the base. I traced one side, flipped it, and traced on the mirror image. I used a retractable utility knife, one that locks in place, to cut out these pieces. Sometimes the cuts will come out pretty rough, but we'll be sanding the edges down anyway until they're smooth. I found out after the fact that hot wires are pretty easy to use with this foam to get super clean cuts, so that is something to look into if you're interested. Before we glue these together, create a shallow 1/2-inch crater on each side of the two top and bottom pieces. I used my Dremel to carve this out. This way, the 3/4 inch diameter PVC pipe will be able to slip in between the foam pieces with ease, fitting snugly. I did not do this step because I forgot and it complicated things for me later, but I would recommend securing the fishing line you will use to hang the floating ball before gluing the two top foam pieces together. Now that you've carved out the hollows of the foam pieces, you can glue the two sides together using a wood glue, tacky glue, or PVA glue. Apply a generous amount of glue. Line up the two sides and press together. Make sure the PVC pipe can fit securely into the holes on each end. I let these dry weighted overnight before continuing. Then comes the fun part, sanding. I started using a sanding bit on my Dremel. Investing in a Dremel or other rotary tool is a great idea if you want to get into cosplay crafting and foam smithing. I believe I used the 1/2-inch band in the standard 120 grit. I slowly and carefully carved away at the edges until they were smooth. For beginner Dremel tips, you can check out my TikTok page where I do a lot of short-form cosplay tips. There are also a lot of beginner Dremel videos found online. Always wear a respirator while sanding this foam because it could be harmful if these teeny tiny particles are breathed in. Safety is very important with cosplay. With this preliminary sanding step finished, I then glued the pipe into the foam ends with a generous amount of tacky glue and allowed it to dry overnight. The PVC pipe I got from the hardware store was about 4.5 feet, but you can adjust the length based on how tall you are before gluing it in. As you can see, there is a noticeable edge where the foam pieces meet the pipe, so we're going to make this a more seamless transition. For this, I used this really handy EVA foam clay by Yaya Han. Right out of the tub, it's slightly moist and entirely moldable. With a little water added, you can smooth it down, and it dries into hardened foam, making it a super malleable and practical material. I sculpted around the edges of the insulation foam pieces and transitioned into the width of the pipe until the shape was smooth and it looked like a cohesive singular piece. I also filled in some spaces where I sanded a little too much and covered my mistakes. And as you can see, that looks much better. Then comes sanding part 2. I started with a coarse sandpaper, in this case 80 grit, and grazed over the entirety of the foam pieces. Then I went in with a medium 100 grit and finished off with a fine 150. This process takes a while, but the end result is very worth it. Now, this next step is another very important part, so don't skip it. Because spray paints and aerosols can eat away at this type of foam, we need to prime it sufficiently. You can prime it in a variety of ways, but my favorite method is using Mod Podge. I used 4 total coats of Mod Podge, making sure each layer dried sufficiently between coats and that I didn't miss any spots. Make sure this cures entirely before spray painting. Finally, it is time to paint. I use this Rustoleum Ultra Cover spray paint in chestnut to achieve the wooden color. I set up a space to paint in my parents' garage, shout out to my mom and dad, and sprayed 2 coats of this all over the staff. Once this is dry, it is time to add the detail pieces. We'll start with the red floating ball. This is a 4-inch diameter clear plastic ornament I got in bulk from Amazon. You're going to want to find the type that can detach in the center and snap shut. Detach the 2 halves and paint the inside walls with red acrylic paint. You will need a few coats of this for full coverage. By painting the inside rather than the outside, you maintain the glossy, plasticky look of the exterior. Once fully dry, they'll shut over the fishing line. So you see, if you're smart, unlike me, you'd have the fishing line secured in the foam already. But since I forgot, I had to go a different route. I collapsed the 2 ornament halves together over the fishing line, which took a bit of struggling, but once that thing is on, it ain't coming off. So make sure to get it on correctly the first time. You might want to find someone to help you with this step. To prep the staff, I'm using a nail to make a small pilot hole where I want the screws to fit in. Measure the distance between the top and bottom of the staff's crescent to determine how long the ball and line combo should be to fit centered within the blank space. Add a couple inches to each end and cut the line. Tie the fishing line around the base with 2 slim screws. You can add a dollop of tacky glue to the screw to secure it. The screws will be inserted into the staff and glued in place. I screwed in a little further into the foam instead of flush with the edge so I could cover this screw later. If done correctly, the fishing line should be nice and taut and the ball should appear as if it is floating. Using the foam clay from before, I rolled a small ball and stuck it into the hole over the head of the screw. I then mixed some acrylic paints to match the chestnut color of the staff and painted over those foam bits. It's like the screws were never there. Next is creating the fabric wrap over the PVC pipe section of the staff. I used this nice white textured fabric from Joann to cut out 2 1-yard by 4-inch strips. I then folded over the strip long ways and pinned it along the side. I sewed this all the way down on both of the 1-yard strips using my sewing machine. By doing this, rather than just cutting it and leaving the ends raw, you don't have to worry about the fabric fraying. I then turned these right side out to complete the strips. I then sewed those 2 strips together to create one full 2-yard by 2-inch strip. I wound this tightly around the PVC pipe at an angle, slightly overlapping each layer to make sure none of the pipe peeked through. Every so often I would use hot glue to secure it and then hot glue the end of the fabric wrap under the last loop. With this secured on, there's only one final piece until the staff is complete, the 2 yellow foam strips. I measured around the insulation foam to get the circumference of the areas I wanted the yellow pieces to fit around. I took these measurements and created 2 2mm EVA foam strips that were about 1 1/4 inches wide and cut them out using an Xacto knife. I then painted those foam strips with yellow acrylic paint. I used 3 coats of yellow paint and 1 coat of glossy Mod Podge to match the gloss of the staff. Once dry, I wrapped the foam around the staff, gluing down with tacky glue and securing with hot glue. And voila! The staff is complete. I will not be doing a step-by-step of the witch hat, but I can say I used an amazing tutorial from SKS Props, which I will link in the description. I used their free template with a few tweaks to create the hat from EVA foam since I'm not as confident in my sewing skills. And with that, let's take a look at the finished product. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope it helps with your Megumin cosplay. If you like this video and you want to check out more cosplay prop tutorials by me, subscribe to my channel, and also I have a TikTok where I post more frequently. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.